I'm going to say a few words. Normally, at FinJS events, we do, it's more about thought leadership and cool things that we're all working on. But because this is the first time we're in Stockholm, and probably many of you don't know OpenFin, I'm just going to spend about 10 minutes giving you the quickest overview of what it is that we do. Just show of hands, how many people have heard of OpenFin before, like know what we do? Okay, that's good. Maybe half the room, maybe a little bit less. So I'm going to give you a quick overview. There we go. So OpenFin is a web-based desktop operating system. It's built on Google Chromium, and the whole idea is it's really two main things that we enable. The first is a web application that looks and feels like a native desktop application, right? So it has native end user experience. The second, it's all about interoperability, enabling all the apps on the same desktop to talk to one another, to communicate, and to share context. And so, the question is, well, like, why are we doing this, and why focus on finance? The answer is because we have, trading desks and other areas within banks that look like this, where the kind of experience that the end user needs is that multi-monitor, multi-window experience with lots of information that the end user needs to consume and synthesize. And so for that reason, the app experience is incredibly important. And for decades now, we've been building native installed applications in .NET and Java and other languages because we want that experience. We want the app experience. The second part, which is interoperability, is really all about the idea that within any large financial services firm, there are any number of different areas in the front office and different asset classes, in all the support areas, whether it's compliance or risk or legal, you name it, where we're building different applications. It's usually by different development teams, and at the end of the day, end users are using a number of these different applications to do their work, and they want these applications to all work together. And so, can we come up with a simpler way to do this than to try to create, a very prescriptive approach within banks, which generally ends up failing? Can we create interoperability approach, which is essentially by default? Now, when you use OpenFin, it's actually quite straightforward, right? You're building a web application, right? It's straight HTML5. You can build it in whatever you want. It can be React, Angular, straight JavaScript, jQuery. It's literally whatever you want. If it works in Chrome, it will work in OpenFin. 99+% of your code when you write an OpenFin app is just straight HTML5. The less than 1% of the code that you're going to write is code that references the OpenFin API. And it's that API that enables the native experience that makes your web app now look and feel like a native installed application. And it's that API that enables the interoperability between applications. So here's a quick look at what that API is. There's a windowing API. It lets you do things like animate windows, pop them to front, close them, remove the frames, etc. Right? Everything that you would be able to do if you were a .NET app or a Java app that you can't do if your app is stuck inside a web browser. The second is all about layout management, right? And so it's snapping and docking of windows, saving and restoring of layouts, creating tabbed views. So these are all really common things that people like to do on financial desktops. And we have APIs that allow you to do this natively on OpenFin. We also give you an API for notifications. So these are the push pop-up notifications that you'd get from Outlook or other real-time applications. The difference with these notifications is the notifications themselves are HTML5. And that means they can be dynamic. You can have real-time data in there if you want. You can have links that will spawn other applications. So you get a richness with these notifications that you don't even get with native applications. We also provide APIs for accessing the clipboard and for registering global hotkeys. we give you the ability to access the local operating environment and to do that securely, right? So whether that's getting a device ID or getting access to the cookies, et cetera, including information that you simply would not have access to if you were inside a web browser. The key is that we enable all of this in a very secure way. I mentioned the inter-application bus, so this is a local message bus that's right on the desktop that all the apps running on OpenFin are connected to. It has some really simple methods like publish and subscribe and listening to events, et cetera, everything you would expect. And the whole point is to allow the apps to locally talk to one another and to share data and to share context. We also have native language adapters that allow you to connect to that inter-application bus even if you are not an app that runs on OpenFin, right? So if you're a .NET app running natively, a Java app, could be a Python, Adobe Air, Flash, Flex, et cetera, we provide these adapters that let those applications also participate in the workflow on the desktop via the OpenFin bus. These adapters also let you do visual integration, so that includes embedding HTML5 into .NET applications or Java applications. So it really allows you to start with technology that you may have already made an investment in today, and to use OpenFin to migrate over to a web first stack in the future, and to do that with a phased approach. Now, when it comes to interoperability, I want to say a couple quick words about FDC3. So OpenFin, which has been in production for about 5 years now, has always had this message bus that I'm talking about, right? So it's always been there. But the problem has been that we never had a common language for the apps to talk to one another, right? So if, I like the telephone analogy. If I'm on a phone call with you and you speak Russian and I speak Chinese, the fact that we're connected to each other is only so useful, right? And that's essentially where things stood up until about last year. So last year we heard from a lot of customers that they wanted to have this common language and to really be able to bring together the user experience across lots of different applications, whether they're in-house applications or third-party applications, and have them all talk to one another. And so that led us to launch this initiative, which is called FDC3. It stands for Financial Desktop Connectivity and Collaboration Consortium. It's a standards group, right? It's a standards group that is in no way references OpenFin, so it's completely vendor and platform neutral. What it does is it defines a language for apps to communicate with one another. If you're familiar with Android intents, there are a lot of similar concepts there. So there's a concept of context that can be passed from one app to another, intents, which are the workflow instructions to, let's say, from one app I can say view chart and have that invoke the apps who know how to view a chart. There's this concept of app discovery that is embedded in an app directory standard that this group is defining. So the FDC3 has been moved under Finos. And so for those of you who don't know Finos, it's the FinTech Open Source Foundation. It used to be called the Symphony Software Foundation. It was rebranded earlier this year, and the scope of the foundation was changed to encompass all of financial services. And so the FDC3 is now under Finos. It's the most active project in Finos. There are now more than 55 banks, buy-side firms, and vendors who are all part of this initiative. And the other really cool thing about this initiative is that it got started with OpenFin, but now there's leadership coming from many firms, including FactSet and IHS Markit, and a number of the banks and buy-side firms. And so it's really become a collaborative industry initiative and not something that's uniquely being driven by OpenFin. So this is a really exciting project. If you're interested in learning more about this, please come find me, or you can also go to fdc3.org, and there's a ton of information there. So I'll just say a few quick words about how you got started with OpenFin. So it's really quite simple. When you run an OpenFin app, you have an app manifest file, and there are really a couple really important bits of information in that file. One is what's the URL to your app, and the other is what is the version of OpenFin that you want your app to run with, right? So you include that in your app manifest file. We have command line interface, CLI tools that allow you to take any web app that is running in the browser today and in about 30 seconds have that application running on OpenFin. You then use the OpenFin API to enhance that application and start to create the native experience and interoperability. So super easy to get started. We spend a lot of time on version management, version control. Every version of OpenFin is tied to a very specific version of Google Chrome. That means you have a controlled environment that you can test, and when you deploy your application to customers or internally for that matter, it's running on that version of Chrome that you're targeting. So the whole cross-browser compatibility problem goes away immediately. We run alpha, beta, and stable channels of the various releases, and we also include the Chrome builds that are used within OpenFin vanilla so that people can test against those. So a lot of information on our developer site about this. We have a multi-runtime architecture, and this is really critical. It was something that was, almost at inception was how we designed OpenFin. The idea was, if you ever worked at a bank, you know that upgrading a web browser takes an incredibly long time. The main reason for that is that on the day that you've upgraded the browser, every single app that ran on the browser needs to continue working, right? And so you can't break mission-critical applications. The way we've solved that in OpenFin is made it so that you can concurrently run multiple versions of the OS engine, the Chrome engine, on the same desktop, right? And you can, every app can target the version it wants. The interoperability between applications works across runtime versions, right? And so that allows folks who want to move quickly to the latest versions of Chrome and OpenFin to do that. And it also allows folks who aren't ready to do that and don't want to recertify their applications to stay on older versions and to move at a timing that makes sense for them. And then, finally, just a view at, where things stand. We're really, really proud of, the number of big customers who are now using OpenFin. So it's a pretty significant swath of big banks and increasingly big asset managers and others. So this is on the end user side of things. We also have a big and growing number of vendors who are using OpenFin to deploy their applications. And so they're deploying those apps into the banks and into buy-side firms. What's great about all of this is that ecosystem now is starting to be really connected, right? So you can now take, a bank running with OpenFin can drop a third-party application running with OpenFin right into their workflow. Those apps can snap and dock to one another instantly. They can start talking to one another instantly without anyone having to do any integration work using FDC3 standards. On the buy side, the same is true of banks who are deploying apps to their buy-side customers. So a buy-side firm will be building with OpenFin. They'll ask the banks to deploy apps with OpenFin to them, and those apps instantly will start working in the environment without anybody having to do any extra work. So this is a really exciting development, and this is really happened over the last 5 years plus. So it's taken some time to get to this level of standardization. But we're really excited about where things stand because today there are over 1,000 apps that are running with OpenFin. Those apps are running at more than 1,500 banks and buy-side firms in 60 countries, and we're fast approaching 200,000 desktops with OpenFin. So that's the huge amount of the work behind making this happen is from our customers. They're the ones who are building the apps on OpenFin and deploying and really innovating with JavaScript. So we're really grateful for that. And we're excited that you're all here. And so if you have not had exposure to OpenFin before, we'd love to tell you more about it. So please find us afterward. We've got a booth out there. Thanks very much.